Hey, what's up, you guys? Welcome back. We are continuing a little kind of mini series about learning how to feed yourself. In the middle of everything that we are facing right now as a society, with having to be kind of secluded and separated, not being able to be together in person, I think now more than ever, it's important for us to be able to learn, if we haven't already, how to feed ourselves spiritually. Now, I've kind of tried to provide you with two different avenues to be able to feed yourselves. The first avenue is through our Selah moments. Those are kind of heart moments to connect with God through scripture and rest and reflection. If you haven't checked those out yet, they're maybe not for everybody, but for the people that those work for, they are really helpful, I think. And we've gotten some really good feedback from people in terms of how those have been going. Now, the second way that we are trying to help you learn to feed yourselves is to give you tips about how to read and understand the Bible. That is kind of our primary source for truth in our lives. Things go up and down and opinions change, but the Bible, understood in its proper context, should be our driving force for truth in how we live our lives. So today I'm going to hope to provide a little bit of information to help you be able to remove one of the barriers that is, I think, really common in why people give up in trying to read and understand the Bible. We think of the Bible as one book, and in a sense it is. But beyond that, the Bible is actually 66 separate books that we have combined and put into one larger context. And there are some reasons for that. For those of you who have read, a series of books, the Chronicles of Narnia or Harry Potter, if you've read Twilight series or whatever, all those different books that have several, it's one long story, but several parts and made up of several books. That's kind of similar to what the Bible is in a sense. Now imagine if you were to approach one of those stories by starting in the middle of a chapter of book 3 and then trying to go on with the story from there. Of course, you're probably going to be confused. You're going to be kind of disconnected. A lot of the foundational things that you end up learning about characters as the stories grow aren't going to be there, and so you might give up trying to read and follow the story. It's kind of the same way when we are dealing with scripture. Sometimes we just kind of thumb through and open up the Bible to a certain book, maybe because we've heard of it before or whatever the case might be, and we just turn to that story and start reading. Well, we get confused and we don't really know the history behind it, and we start to get discouraged, and then that's why a lot of times I think we give up on continuing to read and study the Bible. Now, by contrast, what if you understood where you started reading in whatever story you're reading or in the Bible as it pertains to what we're talking about today? What if you understood a little bit about the history, the background, where that story fits into the overarching story? Well, then you have something to tether to. You have something to help you be able to connect with the story as it was and as it continues to develop and unfold. So today's video is all about doing that. I'm going to share once again from the Bible Project a short video. And like I said, I keep pushing these guys, but they really do an awesome job of taking big concepts, narrowing them down, making them easy to understand. They're very visual, very interactive. It's good stuff. And so I'm going to connect another one of their videos to the end of this. It is about how to read the story of the Bible. What it does is it looks at the entire story from before there was time through the end of all eternity, and in 5 minutes, which is an ambitious task, it takes in 5 minutes, it goes through the entire story of the Bible, and kind of to help us understand where what we're reading fits in. We're going to do that a little bit more in future videos too. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that you are learning to feed yourselves. Hope this is encouraging. If you have questions or run into roadblocks or need something answered, please definitely reach out to me, and I'd be happy to help. So without further ado, here's the Bible Project.
The Bible's an important book, but it's really long.
Yeah, it's a collection of many books written over a long period of time, but altogether they tell one unified story.
So, what's the story of the Bible?
Well, it begins by introducing us to a beautiful mind, the author of all reality, a being called God. And he has the power to take the dark chaos of the uncreated world and bring about order and beauty and a garden full of life.
And to crown this accomplishment, God appoints these creatures called humanity,
Or in Hebrew, Adam.
and they're made as God's image.
Which means that they're commissioned to rule this beautiful world on God's behalf by harnessing all of its potential and creating even more beauty and order.
This is a story about humans using their power to do meaningful, life-giving work. But the question is, how?
Yeah, humanity now faces a choice that's represented by a fruit tree. So humans could partner with God and find freedom by trusting in his knowledge of good and evil.
Or
They could seize power and define good and evil on their own, which, God warns, will kill them.
and they hear the voice of a dark, mysterious creature that tells them the choice is simple. Take the fruit. It'll give you power and freedom to rule the world on your own terms.
And so they seize this knowledge, and as a result, they become suspicious and self-protective. It leads to fractured relationships, violent power grabs, and ultimately, a whole civilization, Babylon, that has redefined evil as good. And so, God scatters this corrupted human project.
And here the story of the Bible takes an important turn. We zoom into the story of a man and a woman who come out of Babylon, Abraham and Sarah.
Yeah, God promises that from them will come a new people, a nation that has another chance to make the right choice. And if they succeed, it will open up this new way forward for the rest of humanity.
And this is why the rest of the Bible story is about this family.
And it does not go well. Despite God's personal guidance, Abraham's family gives in to that same temptation to redefine good and evil on their own terms, apart from God.
Even when their best people were in charge, rulers who loved God's guidance and had divine wisdom, even they gave in.
And so Israel was warned by their own prophets that these choices would lead them back to Babylon, this time as conquered captives living in exile, and that's exactly what happened.
So even with God's personal guidance, Israel fails. Who can succeed?
Well, the prophet said that the story wasn't over. God's going to send a new leader to Israel to cover for their failures and to transform the people's hearts and minds so that they can make the right choice.
And so the part of the Bible called the Old Testament ends, and these promises are left hanging.
And then the biblical story continues into the New Testament. We're introduced to a man who comes from the line of Israel's kings, Jesus of Nazareth. And he said that he was bringing all these promises to their completion.
He confronted that dark, mysterious evil that all humanity has given into and resisted its power.
And then he announced that God had arrived to rule the world through himself. Jesus taught about God's definition of good and evil, and he said that real power is serving others. According to Jesus, it's people who love the poor and even love their enemies. These are the kinds of people who actually rule the world.
And that's confusing, but also really beautiful.
And so is the claim that the story goes on to make about Jesus, that he is God become human, to be for Israel and for all humanity what we could never be for ourselves. He came to take the consequences of our evil into himself, and his sacrificial love proved more powerful than evil, than even death itself.
So now humanity's presented with a new choice.
Represented by a new tree.
Stick with the old way of being human, or venture into this new way.
And in the story, those who choose the way of Jesus find themselves energized by God's own power. People who know that they are loved and forgiven by God can become people who love and forgive others in return.
The Jesus movement quickly spread throughout the world, forming these new communities of people who follow the way of Jesus.
But they faced problems. There was persecution from the outside by people in power, and inside there was confusion, even compromise.
Yeah, because following Jesus is really hard.
And so the movement's leaders, called apostles, they wrote letters to comfort and to challenge these communities to stay faithful to the difficult way of Jesus.
And they're called to hope for the day when Jesus will come and change everything.
And so the Bible ends by pointing to the future day, when all wrongs are made right, when evil is eradicated, heaven and earth are united, and humanity can rule the world together in the love and power